Hi, my name is Ted Treska. I'm a fisheries biologist with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service in Green Bay, Wisconsin. I'm here to talk to you a little bit about the newly forming Green Bay Working Group. This is kind of a culmination of some effort that's been going on for about 3 years in Green Bay. It has been known as the Green Bay Coordination Group. We've gotten together a lot of the folks that work on fisheries and natural resource stuff around Green Bay to kind of put our heads together and try and figure out what we're doing similarly, what we're doing separately, how we can make things better. Maybe not. It's okay. So, as you can see, the Green Bay watershed is fairly large. It contributes about 25% of the water into Lake Michigan, with drainages all the way up into the UP and a good chunk of Wisconsin. And at the coordination meeting, we've had representation from a number of different agencies, both Wisconsin and Michigan DNRs, ourselves at the Fish and Wildlife Service, the USGS, UW Milwaukee, UW Stevens Point, and also Green Bay. We've also had good contributions from the New Water, which is the Green Bay Sewerage District, which has a lot of roles in terms of water quality at the southern end of the bay. Wisconsin Sea Grant, the Nature Conservancy, and a number of other natural resources groups, including counties and other interested parties. The Green Bay Working Group was initiated by the LMTC in the summer of 2016 meeting, kind of asking the coordination group to actually become a working group. Our function would be to address unique issues and situations that come up on the bay and coordinate activities across the bay. Seeing as Green Bay is a very dynamic fishery, it's been a fishery throughout history, whether it be ciscos in the 50s, more recently walleyes and muskies. It seems to change very quickly and very dynamically depending on what's going on in the bay, the prey and forage base and that kind of thing. But it's a place where we don't know a whole lot across the whole entire water body. To become a Green Bay Working Group, we need to do a few steps. We're proposed some terms of reference for the group, a proposed list of agency members to try and figure out who we need to have as voting members and who we need to have for just resource members around the group. And like I said, this is based on the coordination group, which has been meeting in the winter for the last 3 years. When we put together a map of all the things we've done since 2010 for most of the agencies that are doing work out there, we found that we sample a lot of water. And we put a lot of nets out, we take a lot of water quality samples, we do a lot of things. It's just that we don't have a way to share a lot of that science except for when we come to meetings like this and over lunch, that kind of thing. So the working group is an effort to bring these together, figure out where we're duplicating effort if we are, how we can make things better, if we can make things more efficient around the bay. So some recent collaborative efforts have come out of the collaboration meeting. In this next upcoming year, we have a lake whitefish and muskellunge telemetry study that's going on in the bay with 96 receivers, looking at mostly movement and spawning patterns for these fish. There's been an upsurge in lake whitefish spawning in a lot of the tributaries around Green Bay. So a lot of these arrays are going to be focused around the mouths of those rivers and in key places around the bay to figure out movement around the Chambers Island, put a curtain there, another curtain at the exit to Lake Michigan, and a number of other strategic locations. That's some work being done mostly by UW Stevens Point, but there's collaborators from a lot of the agencies that are in the working group. Water quality sampling, like I mentioned, the Sewerage District in Green Bay is really interested in the impacts of the sewage, their outflows on the bay along with the Fox River inputs. It's a highly agricultural runoff area from the agricultural area of the Fox Valley and the farming around there. And to get a better idea, we can provide, when we're out doing fishery samples, we can do depth profiles, take DO measurements, and get them more data that can help them explore the impacts of what's going on in the river and with their outflows. They also have been doing some work out of UW Milwaukee with an oxic zone that's been moving around the bay in the last couple of years and trying to figure out if we can quantify more of the impacts of that, what impacts it has on fish movement, that kind of thing. There's also been some work going on in nearshore fish community. This is mostly UW Green Bay with a lot of sampling around the bay in shallow water areas. And they've also been doing a fair bit of habitat mapping in some key areas I'll show a little bit later. To become a working group, we kind of spitballed a lot of things around this last meeting, this last January. If we're going to be a working group, we need to have some of the key factors that things like the Lake Michigan Tech Committee have and other working groups. And we modeled a lot of this off of the St. Mary's River Working Group that's been in existence. I'll touch on a little bit later. But we put together a list of objectives and goals. This is something that we just kind of rambled on, tried to whittle it down to some manageable list. And this is something that will be, passed up to the Lake Michigan Committee, Lake Michigan Tech Committee for their review and that kind of thing. But some ideas that we had. Overall, to produce a coordinated standardized assessment methodology for the bay. Like I said, we're doing a lot of different sampling. Wisconsin does a lot of walleye sampling in the southern part of the bay. Michigan does a lot of sampling in the northern part of the bay. But we don't do a whole lot in between. And we all seem to be setting different gear. So we don't have a comparative gear that we can look at across the bay. And we'd like to do that. It's just getting everybody to get on the same page, and changing gears is always a hard thing in terms of long-term surveys. Another goal would be to produce data that's compatible for comparison with the main lake. This would mainly be for hydroacoustics and trawl data, so we could be comparable to the USGS work that goes on in the main lake. Green Bay has been known as a large forage producer. It's a very productive water, so there's been, I've heard talks that a lot of alewife used to be produced in Green Bay and would make their way out into the lake, find out whether this is actually still happening or what the forage base is in Green Bay. Also have a cooperative data sharing agreement between all the contributors, so we all can look at the fishery across the bay instead of just seeing whatever the localized pocket is. Wisconsin knows what Wisconsin walleyes do, but they don't know what Michigan or northern part of the bay walleyes do. Incorporating goals of contributing agencies or the Lake Michigan Committee. Produce data that is useful for stakeholder groups. We're all beholden to the stakeholders that we represent. This would be commercial, anglers, number of other things, area of concern efforts. The Fox River is an area of concern given the PCB loading that's been going on there. So with some of the fisheries work that we do, we could contribute a lot to monitoring for these different efforts. And some evaluations of habitat usage and restoration efforts. There's a lot of parts of Green Bay that have been degraded by logging, farming, that kind of thing. And looking at what habitat's available and what we need more of, where we could have our most impact on habitat restoration. We also put together a list of research theme ideas, and these I'll run through these kind of quickly. Understanding of predator-prey relationships. This is a big one. I know Wisconsin DNR has put some effort behind this to look at the relationships that are the main fishes in the bay, whitefish, walleyes, perch, that kind of thing, and trying to figure out, we have a lot of most of these fish, and just how they're impacting each other in terms of diet studies, overlap, that kind of thing. The contributions of wetlands and coastal areas with changing water levels. We have a lot of different varying coastal areas, the impacts of those for spawning and nursery areas. Fish distribution and movement, somewhat in relation to the hypoxic zone I mentioned before. Understanding stock structure of commercially, sport, and culturally important species. This would be whitefish, walleyes, muskies, and sturgeon, all of which are major players in Green Bay. Looking at food webs, including primary production, plankton, nutrient loading, etc. We don't have a whole lot there's not much work that goes on in Green Bay that looks at primary production. It's mostly a lot further down the line in terms of predators, so we don't have an idea of what's going on in there. There's been some historical data to say that hexagenia used to be really common in Green Bay back in the 30s, and then there were studies that went on in the 50s and the 70s to say that they were pretty much almost gone by the end of the 70s. There's been an effort by UW-Milwaukee to reintroduce hexagenia as a food source, so it'd be good to get an idea of whether they're actually making it, where they're reproducing, where this effort actually has success. Also, it would help in the early detection and monitoring of AIS. We have an AIS program in our office at the service, but also any net that's in the water can be called an AIS detection effort. Commercial fishers are a big part of this. They know what they should be catching in their nets, and they know what things that they don't want to catch, and things that look funny are usually something they bring to our attention, which is great. Also describe the variability of the bay in relation to the main lake, the fish trends, the physical and chemical characteristics, how different is the bay. Are there different parts of the bay? We found some anecdotal information that the northern part of the bay is much more like the main lake than the southern part, mostly because of the inputs of the southern part of the bay. and also enhancing the Green Bay hydrological model, which is a model that's been put together and is useful for water flows and looking at that, but also we'd like to include some biological linkages. We know what impacts does this flow have on movement of fish, spawning success, that kind of different things. We also brought up the idea that we need to stay relevant. It's one of those things, there's a lot of working groups out there that come and they're great for a couple of years and then they just kind of fade into the background, and we want to make sure that that wasn't the fate of the Green Bay Working Group. So we came up with some ideas to maybe produce a Green Bay section of the State of the Lake report, or produce an independent State of the Bay report to summarize annually what the efforts that are going on, what trends we see, that kind of things we could hand out at a Lakes meeting or different stakeholder meetings. Also use existing forums to give presentations to stakeholders on different aspects, whether it's fisheries, water quality, primary productivity, you name it. University of Wisconsin Green Bay has a monthly forum that they use to communicate some of the work that they do to the public, and they were more than willing to help, inject the working group in there at strategic times to give updates on different things. And make sure that we have representation or at least awareness in other groups. There's the Natural Resource Damage Assessment Trustees meetings that go along with the Green Bay AOC. The Menominee River also has an AOC. It was a heavily impacted river in the past, but it's showing good signs. But just to make sure that these organizations know what we're doing and make sure that we can coordinate with different efforts. Like I mentioned, the St. Mary's River was a working group that started a number of years ago. So we've kind of built off their example. They have member agencies, kind of like the voting core, and then resource members, which are academia, other groups, counties, soil and water conservation districts, such like that. They do a comprehensive community survey every 3 to 6 years with an annual fall walleye survey. So their effort may be a little more sporadic. I think in Green Bay we'd like to do more of a consistent survey if possible. Just given the dynamic of Green Bay, we had and sometimes have glimpses of a large perch fishery, and a perch fishery can be gone in 3 to 6 years. It can come and go without even being noticed if you're not out there looking. They meet twice a year twice a year in person, and we'd probably like to echo something like that, given the scheduling of everybody that's on the board. They incorporate the Army Corps of Engineers, Sea Lamprey Control, habitat personnel, so we'd like to pull those folks in too. It might make for a large group, but these are important aspects. And they've also brought in angling interest groups. They use them to tag fish for a tag study. And they found that they got a lot of interest from the angling group, and they increased their sample size greatly by using, angling groups that were interested and engaged, and were willing to take the time to put the tags in and in the manner that was dictated. And for the St. Mary's River, they developed fishery community objectives for the river to say that here's our goal, and where are we in relation of attaining those goals. And we're not sure. It's one of those things that the Green Bay Working Group could have. It's way out on the horizon for us. We need to have an idea of what our baseline is to have goals. So we put together a tentative list of working group members from the service. It'd be myself, Rob Elliott, who works with Lake Sturgeon, and Dale Hansen, who also works with me on native species. A few folks from Wisconsin DNR, Scott Hansen, Steve Hogler, and Yab Say. And from the Michigan DNR, probably Troy Zorn and Darren Kramer. And from USGS, Chuck Medenjan. Talked to everybody's supervisor, and it seemed like I think everybody was pretty okay with putting one more entree on these folks' plates, but we'll try and keep it as productive as we can. Like I said, the plenary includes the different universities, the sewage district, probably bring in the Army Corps. They do a fair amount of work with the lower part of the bay in terms of dredging. The Nature Conservancy, we'll probably see if we can pull in one of the tribal representatives, because there are treaty fisheries up in the northern part of the bay that need to be represented. And then cracking open the habitat world. There's a lot of stuff going on that us in the fisheries don't know exactly, but we know the right people, we just have to pull them in. So we're looking for just a little bit of LMTC guidance as we go along, in terms of feedback and approval. Should we have fish objectives? The members are going to get together hopefully soon before the field season starts and talk about the standardized sampling. We've proposed gillnet survey and hydroacoustic stuff, hydroacoustic surveys to kind of pair what resources we have so that we can get twice as much work done as we usually do. Just some recent results I'm going to flip through. This is some Wisconsin DNR numbers just to give you an idea of what's out there. Smelt and alewife, I lost the axis, but I think this is about 2000 to 2015. Another one with Young of the Year yellow perch trawling surveys. This is shallow sites in the black bars, deep sites in the white bars, just to show you that there's a lot of fluctuation, boom and bust in some of these populations. This is some of the habitat and mapping working that UWGB has been doing. This is some depth mapping that one of the associate professors in Green Bay has been doing. You can kind of see there's this is a Cat Island chain. This white line out here is a reconstructed barrier island kind of complex that they've been putting together to make habitat. The Fox River flows out just over here, and this is Duck Creek, and it's a very productive area, and so they're trying to do a lot of things, but this was done with creeking, so the deep water, that's actually where the peninsula is. It's not quite true, but it gives you an idea of what's going on in the bay. He also did some work with sediment hardness, kind of going from hard sand in the lighter colors to soft muck in the dark colors. So using this for looking at spawning areas, nursery areas, that kind of thing, as to what kind of production could be in Green Bay. And I'll just end with a little bit of the work we've been doing with the hydroacoustics. We take as much time as we can with the Spencer Baird that does some transects out in the main lake here to complement the USGS work. And we run as many transects as we can in Green Bay over the last 2 years, trying to develop a hydroacoustic baseline for what's for forage and whitefish and that kind of species in the deeper waters of Green Bay. We've been using some hydroacoustic interpolation stuff. We use the same kind of approach Dan Mule uses on Lake Superior. We've been comparing that with some work that Dave Warner does with Gene Adams to look at the two different estimates and trying to rectify where they're different and which one is most appropriate for looking at data in Green Bay, just because we have different water profiles, and looking at the different returns will give us different results that you can see here. This is a comparison of the spreadsheet, the spreadsheet which is Lake Superior, and the R script which is Lake Michigan. And you can see it produces different estimates for different species. We'll see alewife, lake whitefish, and rainbow smelt. It seems like rainbow smelt and lake whitefish kind of have a fluctuating dynamic, but produce a large number of the forage in the bay. And if you look at some of these numbers, we're talking 20 to 30 kilotons of whitefish just in the bay itself. It's a fishery that came up about a decade and a half ago, and it's been huge and seems to show signs of persisting. Alewife and rainbow smelt production is fairly big, but like I said, if we can get better data on this, more transects, more coverage, we can give a better estimate. Our confidence intervals will shrink, and we'll move on to producing a better, higher quality estimate and more informative information for the rest of the lake to look at. And with that, I'll take any questions for a minute and a half.